The heavy oak doors of the courtroom swing open, but this isn't just another day of legal proceedings. Today, the air feels different. It's thick with a specific kind of tension, the kind that arises when an immovable object meets an unstoppable force. On one side, we have Elena, a woman who has spent her entire life navigating the world using a secret currency, her appearance. With a perfectly curated outfit, a confident toss of her hair, and a smile that she's used 1,000 times to soften the hearts of traffic cops and managers alike, she walks in as if she's entering a VIP lounge, not a court of law. To Elena, the world is a series of doors that open automatically if you look the part. She believes that rules are rigid for others, but flexible for her. This is the pretty privilege in its purest, most toxic form, a belief that charm can substitute for accountability. But as she takes her place behind the podium, she isn't facing a fan or a bystander. She is standing before the legendary Judge Judy. The atmosphere shifts instantly. Judge Judy doesn't look at Elena's designer handbag or her rehearsed expression. She looks through them. Behind those lace collars is a mind that has seen every trick in the book, every fake tear, and every attempt to manipulate the truth. The courtroom goes silent as the gavel strikes, a sound that echoes like a thunderclap, signaling the end of Elena's curated reality. The case seems simple on paper. A dispute over a high-end rental property and thousands of dollars in unpaid damages. Yet deeper down, it's a battle of philosophies. Elena's defense isn't built on receipts or contracts. It's built on the assumption that she is too likable to be guilty. She leans into the microphone, her voice melodic and soft, attempting to weave a web of excuses that have worked in every other aspect of her life. But here, in this room, the currency of beauty has zero value. The exchange rate for charm is suddenly bankrupt. Judge Judy's eyes narrow, sensing the manipulation before a single sentence is finished. The stage is set for a collision that Elena never saw coming. She thought she could bypass the law with a smile. But she's about to realize that in this courtroom, the only thing that matters is the cold, hard truth. The illusion is about to shatter, and the fall from grace will be televised. The case begins, and Elena wastes no time putting her strategy into motion. As the plaintiff, a middle-aged, hard-working landlord named Mr. Henderson begins to describe the state of his property, Elena doesn't look at the evidence. Instead, she looks at the camera, then at the audience, tilting her head with a practiced expression of, "Can you believe this guy?" It's a classic move from the playbook of the entitled, "If you can't discredit the facts, try to discredit the person by looking superior." She huffs, rolls her eyes, and sighs loudly, a performance designed to signal that she is far too sophisticated, far too elegant to have ever caused the destruction Mr. Henderson is describing. But Judge Judy isn't watching the performance. She's reading the room, and more importantly, she's reading the person. "Out!" Judge Judy barks, not at Elena yet, but at the noise in the courtroom. She turns her laser focus back to the papers. Mr. Henderson presents a series of photographs. They are harrowing: scratched hardwood floors, stained carpets that look like a war zone, and walls that have been decimated. Elena's demeanor remains unshaken. When it's her turn to speak, she doesn't lead with proof of repairs. She leads with a complaint about the energy of the house. "Your Honor," she begins, her voice dripping with a forced sweetness, "I am a very aesthetic person. I take pride in my surroundings. It's simply impossible that someone like me would live in such conditions. Mr. Henderson is clearly exaggerated because he saw my lifestyle and wanted to take advantage of me." This is the moment the first crack appears in Elena's armor. She just committed the ultimate sin in Judge Judy's courtroom. She used who I am as a defense for what I did. Judge Judy leans forward, her glasses perched on the edge of her nose like a predator preparing to strike. "Madam," Judy interrupts, her voice a low, dangerous rumble. "I don't care if you're the Queen of Sheba. I don't care about your lifestyle or your aesthetics. I care about the four walls of this contract. Do you have a receipt for the professional cleaning you claimed you did? Yes or no?" Elena stammers. For the first time, that perfect smile falters. She wasn't prepared for a yes or no world. She was prepared for a world of maybe, and let's talk about it over coffee. She looks down at her manicured nails, then back at the judge, trying to regain her footing with a flirtatious shrug. "Well, I had a friend help me." "A friend?" Judy fires back. "A friend is not a professional service. You're telling me you moved out of a $5,000 a month rental and thought a friend with a vacuum cleaner was sufficient? You think you're special, don't you?" The courtroom air turns ice cold. Elena's beauty is still there, but it's no longer a shield, it's becoming a target. The realization starts to dawn on her. Her charm isn't just failing, it's insulting the very woman who holds her fate in her hands. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifts from tense to predatory. Judge Judy isn't just presiding over a case anymore, she is dissecting a delusion. Elena stands there, her hand resting lightly on her designer bag, still trying to project an image of a victimized socialite. She begins her counter-argument, but it's not based on facts, it's based on feelings. Your Honor, she says, batting her lashes slightly, a move that has worked in countless boardrooms and high-end restaurants. I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. I've always been treated with respect in my previous rentals. I'm a person of high standards. Mr. Henderson is simply trying to extort me because he knows I have the means to pay. The silence that follows is deafening. Judge Judy stares at her for 5 long seconds, a silence that feels like an eternity. Then, the explosion happens. Extort you? Judy's voice rings out like a crack of a whip. Madam, look at these pictures. This isn't extortion. This is evidence of a catastrophe. You lived in this man's property like a squatter with a trust fund. You didn't pay for the damages because you thought your standards were enough to settle the bill. Well, in this courtroom, the only standard we have is the law, and you've failed it miserably. Elena's face flushes a deep crimson. The pretty privilege she had relied on her entire life is evaporating in real time. She tries to interrupt, to offer another excuse about her busy schedule and how unfair the world is being to her. But Judge Judy shuts her down with a single pointed finger. Don't speak until I ask you a question. You think that because you're articulate and well-dressed, you can talk your way out of a contract? A contract is not a suggestion. It's a promise. And you broke it. At this point, the audience can see the physical change in Elena. The confidence is replaced by a desperate, frantic energy. She looks around the room, searching for someone, anyone to give her a sympathetic look. But there is none. Mr. Henderson sits quietly, his face a mask of weary relief, while Judge Judy begins to tally the costs on her notepad. Elena realizes that her charm, which she once thought was an unlimited credit card, has just been declined. She is no longer the it girl, she is just a defendant who owes money. The realization is a bitter pill, and she's forced to swallow it in front of the world. The lesson is clear. Beauty may get you into the room, but only character keeps you there. And right now, Elena's character is looking very, very ugly. The atmosphere in the courtroom has shifted from a mere legal dispute into a masterclass in accountability. Elena is no longer leaning casually against the podium. She is gripping it, her knuckles white, as Judge Judy begins to systematically dismantle her remaining defenses. Now, let's talk about the security deposit, Judy says, her voice as sharp as a surgical scalpel. You claimed in your filing that you left the place immaculate. Do you know what the definition of immaculate is, madam? It means spotlessly clean, pure, flawless. Judy holds up a new set of documents, the move-out inspection report signed by a third-party agency. This report says there was a smell of stale smoke and expensive perfume embedded in the drapes, which had to be replaced. It says the marble countertops in the kitchen, which cost more than most people's cars, were etched with acid stains from what looks like a wild party. Was that part of your aesthetic too? Elena tries to regain her composure. She adopts a look of hurt innocence, a flicker of a tear appearing in the corner of her eye. Your Honor, I hosted a small charity event. It was for a good cause. I didn't think Mr. Henderson would be so petty about minor wear and tear. I've lived in much more expensive places than this, and no one has ever treated me with such hostility. Hostility? Judy roars, the gavel coming down with a finality that makes everyone jump. It's not hostility, it's a bill. You don't get a charity discount on someone else's property damage. You don't get to ruin a man's investment and then cry because he wants his money back. And don't you dare try to leak those tears in here. Save them for someone who's buying what you're selling, because I'm not. The camera catches Elena's face. At that exact moment, the mask has completely fallen. The charity event excuse was her last line of defense, a desperate attempt to frame herself as a noble person being bullied by a greedy landlord. But in front of Judge Judy, your good intentions don't pay for ruined marble. Elena looks at Mr. Henderson, expecting to see guilt in his eyes, but she only finds a man who is tired of being walked over by people who think they are better than him. The power dynamic has completely inverted. The woman who thought she was untouchable is now being exposed as someone who is simply irresponsible. Judge Judy leans back, a look of grim satisfaction on her face. We're done with the excuses. Now, we're going to talk about the law. Elena's world of privilege hasn't just cracked, it has collapsed entirely under the weight of the cold, hard truth. The silence in the courtroom is no longer just quiet. It is heavy with the weight of impending judgment. Elena stands motionless, her eyes fixed on the floor, as if trying to find a trapdoor that would whisk her away from this public exposure. The charismatic, untouchable version of herself that she presented at the beginning of the hour has been stripped away, layer by layer. Judge Judy looks at her, not with anger, but with a cold, clinical disappointment. It's the look of a person who has seen this exact same performance 1,000 times and is thoroughly unimpressed. "You see, madam," Judy says, her voice echoing through the chamber, "people like you think the world is a stage and everyone else is just an extra in your movie. You thought Mr. Henderson was just a minor character you could step over on your way to something better. You used his property, you damaged his livelihood, and you thought your presence alone was payment enough." Elena tries to find her voice, her throat dry. I had every intention of making it right, Your Honor. I just needed more time. Life has been very stressful lately." "Stressful?" Judy scoffs, the word hitting like a physical blow. Stress is what Mr. Henderson felt when he walked into his apartment and saw his investment ruined. Stress is what a person feels when they work 40 years to afford a property, only to have someone with a busy schedule treat it like a trash can. Your stress is a luxury, madam. His stress is a reality. And today, your luxury has run out. Judge Judy begins to read the final tally of damages. Every itemized expense is like a nail in the coffin of Elena's vanity. $500 for the drapes, $1,200 for the floor refinishing, $2,000 for the marble restoration. With every number, Elena's shoulders sink lower. The pretty privilege she once wielded as a weapon has turned into a heavy chain. She realizes that the audience isn't looking at her with admiration or even envy anymore. They are looking at her with pity, the kind of pity reserved for someone who has finally been caught in a lie they can no longer maintain. The total comes to $4,800, Judy announces, her eyes locking onto Elena's. "That is the cost of your lifestyle. That is the price of your arrogance. And you will pay every cent of it." Elena looks up, her eyes glassy, the realization hitting her that in this world, beauty might open doors, but it won't pay the rent, and it certainly won't buy you a pass from Judge Judy. The queen of the courtroom has just issued her decree, and for the first time in her life, Elena has no choice but to obey. One of the most profound tragedies for those who live behind a mask of appearance and perceived privilege is the sudden, deafening silence that follows when real trouble arrives. Elena stands there, her shoulders trembling not just because of the $5,000 judgment looming over her, but because of the chilling isolation now enveloping her in the courtroom. At the beginning of the proceedings, Elena repeatedly dropped names, mentioning friends and social circles, as if they were her personal Praetorian Guard. She boasted about the people who helped her clean, the high-profile guests at her charity event, and the influencers who constantly validated her lifestyle. But now, as Judge Judy demands cold, hard evidence, those faces are nowhere to be found. "Where is this friend who supposedly helped you clean, madam?" Judge Judy asks, her voice dripping with a lethal dose of irony. "Where are the witnesses who can stand under oath and testify that this property was in the pristine condition you claimed? You've spent a lot of time talking about your social standing, but it seems your circle has a habit of becoming invisible when the truth is required." Elena glances around the gallery once more. There is no one there to catch her eye, no one to offer a supportive nod. The people who celebrated her beauty and high-end lifestyle on social media haven't shown up to face the gritty reality of a legal battle. She is realizing, in the most painful way possible, a fundamental truth. Beauty might attract a crowd, but only integrity keeps people by your side. Those she called friends were merely fans of her curated image, and the moment Judge Judy tore that image to shreds, they vanished like smoke in a gale. "You are alone in your lie," Judge Judy continues, peering through Elena's still glamorous but now utterly defeated facade. "You thought you could use your charm to make people do your dirty work, and you thought that same charm would convince me to ignore the facts. But facts don't have friends, and they don't care about your follower count. You've spent your life building a house of cards, and today, Mr. Henderson provided the wind that brought it all down." Elena tries to mutter one last defense, a desperate attempt to salvage a shred of her dignity. I thought people understood me better." Oh, they understand you perfectly now. Judy cuts her off with a brutal finality. They see a woman who values her vanity more than her obligations. They see someone who thinks she is too pretty to be honest. And that, madam, is the ugliest thing in this room. The judgment isn't just financial, it's an autopsy of character. As Elena steps away from the podium, she realizes her bank account might settle the debt, but no amount of money can buy back the respect she just lost. The gavel has not yet fallen for the final time, but in the heart of the courtroom, the air feels as thin as ice. Elena stands at the podium, no longer the radiant center of attention she imagined herself to be, but a hollowed-out version of the woman who walked in an hour ago. Her designer clothes, once her armor, now feel like a costume that no longer fits the narrative. Judge Judy takes a slow, deliberate sip from her water mug, her eyes never leaving Elena's face. This is the moment of the moral autopsy where the court moves beyond the damage to the property and addresses the damage to the soul. You've spent this entire afternoon trying to sell me a bill of goods, madam, Judge Judy begins, her voice surprisingly calm, which is far more terrifying than her shout. You tried to sell me on your status, your aesthetics, and your good intentions. But here's the problem with people who live their lives on the surface. You forget that eventually someone is going to look underneath. And when I looked underneath your polished exterior, I didn't find a mistake. I found a calculation. I found a woman who believed that the rules were for the little people, the landlords, the contractors, the people who actually work for a living. Judge Judy turns her attention to the final line of the judgment sheet. Mr. Henderson is a man who maintains his properties with his own hands. He doesn't have an entourage. He has a toolbox. And you treated his hard work like it was disposable, because you thought you were too beautiful to be bothered with the consequences of your own mess. Judy leans forward, the lace of her collar contrasting sharply with the steel in her gaze. Well, today, the bill is due. And it's not just a financial bill, it's a reality check that was 20 years overdue. Elena tries to speak, her lips parting as if to offer one last but the sound dies in her throat. There is no charm left to activate. There are no more cards to play. She looks at the judgment. $4,800 plus court costs, plus the immediate dismissal of her frivolous countersuit. It is a total defeat. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $4,800. Judy announces, her voice echoing with the finality of a tomb closing. And let this be a lesson to you. Beauty is a gift, but character is a choice. You chose poorly. Get out of my courtroom. As the gavel finally cracks against the wood, the sound is a death knell for Elena's ego. She doesn't walk out with her head high. She slinks away, the clicking of her expensive heels sounding like a hollow apology to the floor she once thought she owned. The courtroom doors hiss shut behind Elena as she exits, but the silence she leaves behind is not empty. It is filled with the resonance of a truth finally spoken. Inside, Mr. Henderson stands for a moment, the weight of months of frustration finally lifting from his shoulders. It wasn't just about the $4,800. It was about the acknowledgement that his hard work mattered. For the first time in a long time, he feels seen by the system. He nods quietly to the bench, a simple gesture of gratitude to the woman who refused to let a pretty face obscure a plain fact. Judge Judy simply nods back, already reaching for the next file, because justice, like the truth, never sleeps. But the real story continues outside those oak doors. Elena walks through the hallway, her reflection catching in the polished marble walls, the very same kind of marble she treated with such carelessness in Mr. Henderson's home. For years, that reflection was her greatest ally, a magic wand that waved away inconveniences and brought her unearned grace. Today, however, the mirror tells a different story. She sees a woman whose aesthetic was revealed to be a hollow shell. The stares from the people in the hallway aren't filled with the usual admiration. They are filled with the recognition of someone who tried to play a game and lost to a master. This case serves as a powerful reminder to every one of us watching. The world may often seem unfair, and privilege may seem like an invincible shield, but there are still places where the ground is level. Judge Judy didn't just penalize a tenant, she reaffirmed a social contract. She proved that while beauty might get you a seat at the table, only your actions determine how long you get to stay there. Elena's fall from grace wasn't a tragedy, it was an intervention. It was the moment the universe decided that charm had reached its limit and accountability had to take over. As the screen fades to black, we are left with a lingering thought. We live in an era of filters, curated lives, and carefully managed images. It is easy to start believing that we can bypass the boring rules of honesty and responsibility if we just look the part. But as Elena learned today, those filters eventually fail. The lights eventually dim. And when you are standing in the harsh, unfiltered glare of the truth, the only thing that will stand with you is your character. If you enjoyed seeing justice served and believe that no one is above the law, then let this be a reminder to stay grounded, stay honest, and never mistake a smile for a free pass. Justice was served today, not because a judge was angry, but because a judge was fair. And in the end, that is the most beautiful thing of all.